said open to question, I would say open to debate. First question from the floor. Anything? I have a barrage of questions, but I don't want to monopolize. So, Mr. Deo, you are maintaining a stoic silence. Unusual. You, audience. Okay, any questions? All right, just to, so basically what I get is that I'm actually depressed, Dr. Deo. I must confess, first time being associated with the power sector for 36 years. I've been doing IPPI conferences for 23 years, and I've actually addressed halls where only 3 people were sitting. Started from there, but we kept on determined, and in spite of all the excitement and the ups and downs and whatever, we always found the power sector to be very exciting. Of course, people thought it's a very sukha subject, there's nothing in it. Kya bijli karte ho yaar, boring fellows. I can't see electricity, I can't touch it, I can't feel it. You guys keep talking about it. But unfortunately, I am depressed because of the simple fact that we're going around in circles. And we're losing an opportunity. This is what worries me. And while I appreciate Mr. Maru's optimism, but I think Dr. Deo also asked the same question in a very direct fashion. Who are you going to sell to? And does he have the money to pay you? And you keep on investing. There's something wrong with the private sector. I think we all need psychiatric treatment. Maybe IPPI should open a camp for all power developers, asking them 2-3 simple questions, and maybe they can give answers as to why do you keep investing billions of dollars when you're not sure of getting paid, you're not sure about the tariff, you're not sure about the fuel, you're not sure about the transmission. I'm sure I'll get an answer like, so what? We still want to invest, right? And I'm glad that we still have optimistic people, and that's what the beautiful thing about this country is. But
can I?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
You want to say on?
Yeah. It's really quite a bettering from the eminent people. Let me tell you, investment, as we are talking about, is needed in the country in the electricity
You can't hear
sector.
you, sir. Speak loudly.
As the investment in any case is needed in the electricity sector, and we have seen a lot of enthusiasm which came in after 1995 when the first reform started in the generation sector that went on up to 2002, and we have seen a lot of problems coming in because of the naphtha prices going up and the power plants really not able to come up and produce. Then the government started giving coal mines to set up a power plant. So there was a lot of enthusiasm again that if you have a source available, source of raw material, so most of the companies decided to set up a pithead power plant so as to avoid the transmission problems and coal carrying issues from the railways and all that. And most of the companies managed to get the finances, and the investors also shown a lot of interest because of the deficit of 13% peak deficit what we are having, and the enthusiasm of the government also to bring in reforms in the transmission and the distribution sector to make the power available easily and affordable rates. A lot of investment came in, a lot of enthusiasm was there. Unfortunately, with the Supreme Court...
Being the spoiled sport that I am, I have to provoke you, right?
Yes.
So now you talked about this enthusiasm, and you got the coal blocks, and then you invested the money. Then the Supreme Court said, sorry, all coal blocks cancelled. Now continue.
I'm coming to that. So when the Supreme Court cancelled it, and the government came up and said that we want to auction the coal blocks, it is like a change of the rule midway, and that has impacted. Investment has already been made. Nothing can be done about it. One has to salvage the investment and go along and talk it out how we can handle the situations. The banking sector is under tremendous stress in India. The power plants under tremendous stress because of stranded assets. and now the coal auctions which are taking place, which is seeing its own highs in the coal prices because of the scarcity of coal and because of the fear psychosis, because of the need to energize the power plants which are stranded right now. It's having its toll right now. So what we are talking of enthusiasm of investment in the electricity sector, that what we have seen since 2004 to 2010, it went on because government created the right environment, because the deficit was there as I talked about, is at a very low level right now. Right now the scenario is how to optimize or how to cut the losses, that what the power sector right now is looking at the scenario. Also hoping going forward that government brings in more reforms and brings in transmission lines, so the kind of problems what generators are facing is taken care of. There is anomaly that what we have seen also, when the government gave a lot of license, allowed a lot of generating companies to come and set up a power plant. They were allowed to get hooked to the PGCI lines, but the same old system of planning in India, that until unless you have a somewhere supply point, somewhere buying point, no transmission line will be created. And we were continuing with this kind of thought process since 1950s, and we never thought of that so many power plants are coming up. If we do not create a highways for them, the last mile lines can still be created, but the highways are not there. What's going to happen to these generating stations? So all that has created the problem, which we all realized after 2010 onwards. And the enthusiasm, as we are talking about right now, is absolutely at a low level. So until unless the right reforms are introduced again and these power plants are made viable, I have my doubts that the new investment can be attracted in the electricity sector. So enthusiasm of the past, and now enthusiasm is at least to find out ways and means to salvage the situation. That is the enthusiasm I'm talking about.
Okay.
I think I will just add one thing. When we found all these plants were coming in central India, the question was that how this power will be evacuated. So that's why when the PGCIL came to us with a proposal for 9 high capacity transmission corridor, and this was a departure from the old concept that you must have identified a buyer. It was not possible for these people to identify buyers. They could only tell us where they will sell the power. It was very obvious. The central India doesn't require this electricity. It will go to west, north and south. South, obviously, there was a delay, but all this thing was permitted. So that's why the 9 capacity corridor, we gave a regulatory approval for construction of those corridors, which nearly investment is 58,000 crores is required. And right now, when we talk about that green corridor, we'll have to add 2 more corridors, one in west and one in south. Those corridors also PGCIL is willing to build. There is a self-plan who builds it, because today it is through competitive bidding. There also the experience of private sector has been very mixed, because some of those lines which were given bid out have been completed, some have not even started. There are various reasons for that. Those are the issues. So again, we are talking about, but what has happened is, in most states, the transmission utilities within the state, intrastate, they have not moved, they don't have funds. So how do we move from there? That is also an issue. So point made is very right, because now, but see, the other issue is coming about the long-term open access, medium-term open access. So because for that, when it comes to long-term open access, you need to have identified buyers. You can build transmission corridor, but when it comes to that, I don't see any solution to that, because it is long-term. Because you can allow certain capacity to be floating in the medium term and short term. But what about the long term? That has to be there.
Great.
Can I add one or two more?
Yeah, of course you can. And then Suhas says.
Yeah, as we talked of the transmission, 2 more problems that came up around the same time when so much of generating capacity came up. Somehow, again, I say the planning fault in the country. CA was very well aware of what are the capacities coming up, by what time they will be ready. And we were all aware that what will be the fuel requirement for those capacities to start generating power. And the alignment with the Coal India has not taken place properly. That whether the Coal India is coming up to improve their production or not, or if there are problems in the Coal India, then from where they will be fed coal, so the import will happen. Again, the alignment has not taken place that from where the import will come, whether do we have a port capacities or are we gearing up to increase the port capacity and the connectivity from the port? Nothing happened on that account. And the third, on the top of that, we have three crucial rail lines which could have increased about 100 million ton coal production in the country and supplied to these power plants. They got inordinately delayed. So this
Which are
clearly
these
shows
lines? Which are these lines, since you know?
they are the lines in Chhattisgarh, Orissa and Jharkhand, and which have been taken up now by the government to set up these lines very quickly, so aid to the coal production. Now, these are the lines connecting to the very big coal mines, where the coal production can start immediately, but the evacuation of coal is just not possible. So with these three lines, we'll bring the 100 million ton coal to the market. Will take another, I think, 2 to 3 years' time. So these because of these three problems, when the one department of the government of India was fully aware, but it was not completely integrated with the whole planning process, and that has created this problem. So enthusiasm was right at the right time for the right reason. The investment came in at the right time for the right reason to take care of the 13% peak deficit. But subsequent planning disorientation has caused the discomfort in the sector, and that has brought down the enthusiasm to a very low level today.
Okay, my spirits are now rising, so before I allow him to speak, and before I allow him, I'm going to tell a little story, true story of a generator who wanted to set up a hydropower project in the northeast. The gentleman concerned flew to Guwahati. Then he says, I took a road transportation arrangement was made, drove for 12 hours, slept at the night in a tourist bungalow, got up in the next morning, again traveled for about 9 hours and reached the site. When he reached the site, the tribal chief of that area, which is close to the China border, was there because his people had gone up front. And the gentleman said, the tribal chief, through the translator, said, yes, what can I do for you? He says, sir, I've got a piece of paper from Government of India. I am setting up a hydropower project. So the tribal chief looks at the paper like this, turns it up and down. He says, you can take it back wherever you brought it from. I don't recognize it. Arey Baba, but this is Government of India. He says, I don't recognize it. I am the boss here. You want to do anything here, you talk to me. So the story goes on. The person was quite taken aback. Finally, after 2 days of discussion and negotiation, the tribal chief was placated through promising jobs or whatever. And then it got very more interesting. As soon as he thought the problem is solved, he's about to get into his car and a jeep arrives of the forest department of that particular state and says, sir, sorry, I'm a little late, I'm 1 day late, but you can't set up the project. He says, now what happened? You're a state government. I've got a Government of India, I've got the tribal chief on my side. Now what's your problem? See, you'll be submerging so much forest. Now there has to be compensatory forest to be done as per the law. But there's no place to do compensatory forest in this state. So therefore the project cannot be set up. So cheers to that. Suhas.
I just
Take this.
Yeah, it's on.
I just wanted to, I'd asked a similar question to one of the promoters into the power sector. And I said, you're losing money, you're losing face, you're losing your value in terms of your business. And of course, you're paying lawyers also fees. So why?
Which you didn't mind, of course.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
By
I
the way,
said-
ladies and gentlemen, those of you who want to switch careers, become a lawyer. This is the time.
And I said, why are you continuing to invest or looking at investing into power sector? He just replied a very short answer. He said, power is intoxicating.
Two things. Basically, I agree with Mr. Maro that there has to be some pilot, some kind of showing on the ground that yes, this could be done in terms of competition, in terms of open access. Secondly, with Dr. Dev, I disagree on one point. He said there is no political will. the freedom was given to the regulators for not deciding the tariff for 1 megawatt and above consumers. These directions also were given to FOR. So where is the question of political interference coming in or political will coming in? It is that the regulators do not have will to bring competition, and that's why they have done it, and wrongly, very wrongly, they have taken this issue for public hearing. What is the meaning of the law? What is the meaning of the scheme? What is the competition? That they have taken to the public debate, to public hearing, which is not a right process really. So it is the regulators who are responsible for not bringing the competition in this country. He has told for 2,000 consumers in Maharashtra, 60% of the power required. If they would have been given, there would not have been any tariff for these 2,000 consumers. The tariff for retail consumers would have come down by only 40% of the merit order power will have to procure. And to that extent, the consumers would have been benefited. And to that extent, Mr. Maru and his colleagues would have sold that power to those 2,000 consumers. Now we are talking in not 2,000 consumers, there are 2 crore consumers in Maharashtra. Now this amendment talks of having competition through supply licensees for 2 crores. I suggest that in existing act itself, we can bring competition as a pilot for these 2,000 consumers. For the whole country, if we take it, there are not more than 15,000 consumers who are needing more than 1 megawatt. So let us do pilot for that without even amendment. Amendment can take its own time or place.
Good suggestion. Good
And that is how we should proceed.
Good. I think that we'll make a note, and when we submit our submissions to the standing committee, we'll take this on board. Great. Yes. Please do identify yourself.
My name is Ashok Pinse. I work with Thane Belapur Industries Association. Basically, the carriage and content, we should look at Bombay itself. We have a exactly similar issue going on between Tatas and Reliance. Now, do the consumers really talk about this? This is a question mark. In the first place, what had happened is, because of the high cost of power, large amount of people moved from Reliance to Tatas. After that movement, 2 things did happen. Reliance brought in 3 things: regulatory asset charge, billing charge, and cross-subsidy surcharge. Even then, Tatas were cheaper. Then came the second phase. The moment this large migration occurred, what did happen is the differential started going down. The moment the differential started going down, almost within 3 months or so, 200 megawatt consumers of Tatas moved back from Tatas to Reliance. Now today the Reliance rate has been published. It is in the public domain. Tata's rate has not been there. My gut feel is, if the Tata's rate is there, once again there will be a reverse migration from Reliance to Tata. The question repeatedly comes is, consumers are virtually, I am talking about not, see, the basic movement which occurred is in the commercial and industrial segment, where the impact is very large. It has not occurred in the residential segment at all. So even if you bring it down from 1 megawatt to 1 kilowatt, the movement has not occurred. Why then 23 lakh consumers of Reliance have remained with them, and why only 2 or 3 lakhs are moved back to Tata? This is a question. The second part of it is...
What's the answer to that?
No, I'll make all the then probably.
Okay.
Yeah. The second part to that one is, the moment this occurs, there is a continuously movement of generation capacities committed to a generator, to a supply licensee. Basically, it could be Tata, it could be Reliance. Another part of it is the whole concept of cross-subsidization goes out of the window because a large mass moves. And this will take some time before this happens. So really speaking, it is going to be 2 times to and fro movement. It will be really interesting to see what happens in Mumbai as a carrier content, what is being anticipated.
Let me now talk about this parallel licensee. Because 2003 has a parallel licensee concept. But obviously, this parallel licensee concept is different from carriage and content. The whole idea was that there are states like Jharkhand, where the Jharkhand Electricity Board is supposed to cater to all the population. They don't have any network. So in that case, someone like Tata were to set up a parallel network. It's not a parallel network. It is like a virtual network, and you have got a real network set up by that. So that's why you could have more than one license. As such, we know in SEZ, we are having this problem, what to deal with that. Now, Mumbai was a case when VP Raja was contemplating that. I never, again, advise anyone who has succeeded me. But I could clearly see the hazard, because if you are going to give, because this is an order which has been signed by me and Mr. Jayan Dev also, because Tata had started selectively taking cherry picking. And we said that unless this issue is studied, how it is to be done, this should not be allowed. This was an interim order. Main issue there was whether Tata had a distribution license or not. Because Electricity Act 1910 does not have any word like generation, transmission, distribution. The whole concept was that you set up a power station and supply electricity. And that was going to be in the proximity. You are not going to build long transmission line, etc. That's why that word was not there. So in fact, in our order, we are very clear. We said that the Tata have a distribution right, the distribution license is part of their supply, etc. Then it's a different matter. I don't want to get into appellate tribunal said something in Supreme Court. Then Supreme Court said that, well, in that case, can Tata be allowed to use Reliance lines? See, if there was a very clear concept that these lines don't belong to now Reliance, these lines have to be taken over by somebody neutral, and then let that compete, it will work. Again, we have got this very peculiar situation. You can imagine that if you have the Mumbai airport switching over from Reliance to Tata, and entire slums being left with Reliance. So who is going to pay for that? It's going to be the Ville-Parle consumers, obviously, who are the very vocal middle class, and obviously this is not a very fair way. So in fact, the concept of carriage and content makes a lot of sense. But to do that, Mumbai we are talking about is a private. We have to ask MSCDCL, are you willing to do that in Thane? If they are willing to do that in Thane, it's fine. Let's start with that. Let's try that pilot where we will have lines, because this is what the proposed act says. And it says that the distribution will continue to be still with the state for a long time to come. But then question comes is, what about the old PPAs? They will be floating in air, so an intermediary will be created. Then also they have said that when the more than one supply company comes, there will be one supply company of last resort, which shall be government company. That means the universal service obligation has to be met. Now the whole confusion is coming there. Because how do you really have that company, and how does the supply companies compete? Compete means how they will be allowed. Because ultimately consumer will benefit if there is a complete market segmentation happen, that those who want continuous, good quality power industry, they will be going for even expensive power. And that's what our load shedding experience has shown. You can always do that. It is possible to do it. But I think the important thing is that before we get into these amendments, it will be ideal to have some such pilots. Then only the Chief Minister can be convinced. Even for Prime Minister, it will be very difficult. Because today we have built a model, and that model is very difficult even for anyone to understand. And it has to be demonstrated. Because I think in any new thing, demonstration is the most important thing. And if there are any flaws in it, they can be rectified. Just again making this amendment. Now again the point made by Mr. Jayandev was...
Sir, I just want to, before I forget, the point you made is very important. As per what is visualized in the new act, who is going to pay whom the cross-subsidy surcharge?
No, in fact, that's not clear. In fact, I asked this question in Power Ministry. You are talking about having this distribution company. What will happen in Mumbai and Delhi and Calcutta? They said, no, we are also grappling with this. We also don't know. So now, are you going to now bring a government company there to say that now you take over these lines? Now, this itself is a
contradiction.
And then that intermediate company in which all the
Legacy
PPAs
contracts.
legacy contract.
Yeah.
Now, how is that going to be allocated? The whole idea again is a political. The as we know, in Maharashtra, when it came to separation of MSEB, the breakdown, exercise was done, how many distribution companies we should have in Maharashtra. And finally the conclusion was that since all the consumers, paying consumers, are in western region, it is not possible to do that, because MERC was asked our advice. That time we had given our advice how it could be done, but our advice obviously for political reasons was not considered. And it was a very simple thing, just have one distribution company. But in other states, having created more distribution companies, they have found a solution. They have created one trading company. What does the trading company do? It buys all the power and allocates that power. So this issue of if you have a better consumer mix can be taken care. So what happens in Gujarat, because I am going to Gujarat because Gujarat is a model. So now for Kutch, obviously it is where subsidy is needed. So other discoms cross-subsidize that. And that is done through GUVNL. Because GUVNL is nothing but doing this kind of, that what their company is. So based on all these experiences, I think these new amendments are being proposed. But let us understand what is behind that. And we need to really look into that. Otherwise, we will fall into the same problem. Because the chief minister has to face the reality that the tariff will be different. Now, if the tariff is different, again, I think in Vidarbha, all the public hearing, they used to say, we are suffering, we have all the coal power plants here. We also have a very low water table. And what you are doing is, you are giving all concession to Western Maharashtra. And naturally, because Jayant Dev is from Western Maharashtra, this is what they used to say in this open hearing. This is what has happened. And they said, obviously, chairman, he is not from Maharashtra at all. And they said, only Pramod Dev is from Vidarbha, but he is also not considering our grievance. So this was the situation. So we are dealing with something. That's why I talk about this. This is the political economy. It's not, we don't have solution. But these solutions have to be found with the planners sitting together and working on that. That's why I think we can't get into more detail, but that's what we need to work. And
I think what you said is very significant before you, and I just want to recap this. So what you're really saying is that we are going to have this ordinance pushed through, but we're not very sure who's going to pay the cross-subsidy surcharge to whom. Please, go ahead, ask your question. Do identify yourself.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm Shal Mundra. I'm from Duet India Infrastructure. So I would like to ask IPAI and the panel, have you ever suggested to the government to separate the question of paying subsidy to the consumer and separating the subsidy from the running a business of electricity efficiently and trying to focus the electricity sector on producing electricity efficiently, distributing and selling it efficiently, which in ideal situation the bulk consumer should be able to buy, negotiate a cheaper rate, and a retail would have to pay more because cost of distribution is higher. So right now, when I hear Mr. Dev, the regulators are confused about judgments and orders because they don't want somebody to suffer from having poor customers and people migrating. So all kinds of complications are arising.
Okay.
So why not we separate the question of subsidy, which is ideally the state's job to pay to the consumer if they want to, and let the power sector run efficiently.
Yeah.
That itself is the issue, because the subsidy is at the root of it. Because who is going to subsidize agriculture? That is the political issue. And all your legislators, they come from rural areas. So you have to ask them, how are you going to deal with it? Because one of the things happens is that you also have electricity duty, also tax on sale of electricity. All this really helps for paying cross-subsidy to some extent to agriculture, because whatever the regulator fixes and what the politician want to the agriculture to pay, that gap really is bridged through that. But still there is a gap because agriculture is still being cross-subsidized. And that's the issue comes in, the 1 megawatt consumer moves out, then who will cross-subsidize agriculture? So you have to decide first what will be the subsidy. Now there is no point saying that we don't want subsidy. That is a political reality, and that's why I'm saying that it is the chief minister who had to agree that how much cross subsidy will be given to agriculture and from where it will come. If it is not to come from electricity, then it has to come from somewhere else.
Can
Yeah,
I,
What I am suggesting
no,
is,
hold on.
just- I want to just make a point.
Hold on a
because-
second, let me
yeah.
answer. You just said IPPI also, so I'm also, if you please go back to Google, my new guru, and Google the Green Revolution of Punjab and Norman Borlaug, where they genetically modified the crops and got high yielding varieties. Then you start going down towards the Deccan, which is where we are. You'll realize that the farmers are being pushed into, for various reasons, into what I call unsustainable agricultural operations. And this has happened over the last 30, 40 years. But it has had a positive effect of enriching a lot of farmers. It has also had a positive effect of development of rural areas. But the negative effect is that the water tables have gone down, the electricity consumption has gone up, and it has become very, very difficult for them now to survive and make money. Now, you also may be aware, since you're studying the subject so closely, that the political establishment in this country has something called a minimum support price for some 4 or 5 cash crops: sugarcane, cotton, wheat, and also the 2 other crops, rice and one more, cotton. Now, if that's the case, and I am coming to you and saying, why don't you grow sugarcane? We'll get you a loan from a bank, get you a pump, move away from this rain-fed crop, become prosperous, become rich, you buy into that story, and you start that. Now, the seed company benefits, the fertilizer company benefits, and overall your output goes up. 1 crop, 2 crops, 3 crops. Then you begin to notice that the electricity availability starts dropping from 24 hours to 4 hours. So what you do is you move your 3.5 horsepower pump, remove it, and put a 20 horsepower pump. Why? Because you only get power for 3 hours. So you need a pump to do the job in 1 hour what a pump would have done in 24. Right? Now, why is this happening? Because everybody is putting in pumps, everybody is buying into that story of enrichment, and the water tables are dropping, as Dr. Deo very rightly said. Please understand the political reality, and I think the point has been well emphasized, that you are living in a democracy, unfortunately or fortunately, and everyone is equal to everyone else to raise his voice and has a point of view. If you are living in a democracy, and a majority of the population is rural, and they are electing their representatives who come from that pocket, they cannot be ignored. So the fact of the matter remains, while ideally speaking, you would like the subsidy to come from somewhere else and the government company to run as a not-for-profit. But look at what's happening in the amendment. They are talking about the national tariff policy becoming mandatory. How will the states react to that? The points made by the panel just now, that the political reality is not going to be allowing a lot of these amendments to actually get implemented. We have open access under 2003 Act. How much open access has happened in India? And for whom? And for how long? So, yes, you're on the right track, but the question that you're asking, I suggest be further asked in the tea break, because we're running out of time, with your forgiveness.